Hello and welcome to GSF Podcast, sponsored by the Gary Sinise Foundation's Education and Outreach Initiative, aiming to educate the public on the importance of serving America's veterans, first responders, and their families.
Welcome to the Gary Sinise Foundation Podcast. I'm your host, Cristin Kampsnider. Today I'm here with Gary Sinise Foundation Ambassador, Major General Clay Hutmacher. General Hutmacher is a career U.S. Army officer who retired in 2018 after 40 years in uniform. Now he continues his mission of service as the President and CEO of the Special Operations Warrior Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to funding the education from preschool through college for the children of fallen Special Operations personnel, as well as the children of all Medal of Honor recipients. So, General Hutmacher, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Cristin. It's a pleasure to be here.
We go a long way.
We do.
We do. And so, General, just so our listeners know, you're that guy. Like, you're that guy that people make movies on, that people do TV series on. Like, you're the literal guy. You're like the military Mission Impossible.
I've never really thought about it like that. And by the way, you can call me Clay.
Okay.
I only make my wife call me General.
Oh.
Yes. She hasn't really responded favorably to that, but, hope springs
How
eternal.
often has that worked?
None.
None, never.
No, I still bring it up, but yeah, to no avail. Yeah.
It has never happened.
No.
I mean, our history, I love how many times that our paths have crossed, and one of my favorite times that I remember distinctly, and I wanted to bring it up early on, is when about 10 years ago, Gary went on a trip to go visit. It was like a big tour visiting a handful of our severely, severely wounded heroes who we had built homes for. And he wanted to go after they've kind of been in the homes for a hot minute just to really get their perspective on how it's impacted their lives. And so we created this whole kind of almost like tour of the USA, it seemed like. And one of the stops was to visit. He came into your neck of the woods.
I remember.
You remember?
I remember.
And it was raining, and I remember all of our luggage got completely soaked.
Yep.
And
in the back of the truck.
In the back of the truck.
That's right, yeah. Yep. At Fort Bragg.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And part of the experience was him getting a tour of the secret squirrely Delta Force something location where we weren't even invited. I did not get to experience it. He just goes, "Okay, I'm going with Clay. I'll see you later." And we're like, "What? What's happening?" And,
I remember.
And then he comes back, and we look at him, and we're trying to pry him for information. And we ask him, we're like, "What did you see? What was it like?" And his response was, "Oh, well, it's a secret."
Yes, hopefully it remains one to this day.
It is. Okay,
they
so we're
let him
ask.
peek behind the curtain, and I remember that distinctly. Yeah.
Okay.
They don't do that.
They don't do that.
They don't do
No.
that, and it was just in recognition of Gary's impact on service members and family that they allowed that. But it is not the norm.
Yeah, it's not the.
And I've never asked before that or since then.
Oh my goodness.
Never asked for anyone to ever get access to the compound there.
Oh man. Okay, it makes my imagination even more.
Yeah, it's like Disney World. There's rides, Space Mountain. It's all in there.
Got it.
Yeah, for
Got
sure,
it.
100%.
It's all the fun stuff.
Yeah.
And chaos, I'm sure.
Oh, there's a little chaos.
There's just like a little sprinkle.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Just a
Yeah.
Nothing too much. All right, well, I know we could spend literally the entire podcast talking about your military history. Because it's fascinating. But let's just start with, Why did you join?
Well, really a lack of options was why I joined in life. I mean, I was 17 years old. Mm-hmm. I was living in a foster home. Oh. I dropped out of high school. And the foster family that took me in was the Williams family. And, I mean, most people don't know this, but they had a son, Jeff, who was killed in a motorcycle accident on a motocross race that was my classmate when I was in high school. We didn't really, I mean, I don't want to, weren't really close. I mean, he was actually had his stuff together. I was like the kid you shouldn't play with. But, we were the same age, mm-hmm. and that family took me in, and they were a Christian family, and I mean, they really set a very good example for me. And Charlie, who's since passed, had been a Marine veteran in Korea, in the Korean conflict. He was a combat engineer in the Marines. So, I was listening to his stories about really boot camp, right? Most stories about the Marines always end and begin with boot camp, or begin and end with boot camp. But I thought that's what I needed in my life. So I joined the Marines just because I didn't know what I needed, but I knew I wasn't on a good path.
Right.
So that's why I joined. And the Marines did not disappoint. So they definitely gave me the shock and awe that I needed to put me on a better trajectory in life. And I will always be grateful to them for that.
Oh, that's amazing. And what a history to come from foster care and then finding kind of essentially like a family.
Exactly. Yeah. Finding a family, and then extending that family into the military.
Exactly.
And I mean, I had a 3-year enlistment, which I thought was like rocks don't live that long kind of thing. It was like, man, 3 years, But then, nearly 40, I was a month shy of 41 years when I retired.
Oh, my goodness.
So, obviously it was the right thing for me, and I'm a much better person because of my service in the Marines and then in the Army and the Special Ops world mm-hmm. than I would have been otherwise.
So you transitioned then to the Army.
Yeah, I was in 6.5 years. I had 2 tours in Okinawa, Japan, 1 tour in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and then I was at Marine Barracks, Whidbey Island, Washington, which is closed now, Marine Barracks is closed. And I was actually stationed at Whidbey, and I was a bouncer in our enlisted club bar. And
Stop. The stories.
Oh, yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And I was walking through there, getting ready for my shift, and I saw a brochure on the table that another Marine, a guy named Pixley Urix, he was in a Huey squadron. It was a reserve squadron, mm-hmm. and it was an Army Cobra helicopter hovering on top of the trees with mist coming. I mean, it was a great picture. And I just looked down. I said, "Hey, what's the deal with that?" And it goes, "Oh, it's this warrant officer flight program in the Army." And I was like, "Really?" And so I started looking into it, and I was going down to Fort Lewis, now Joint Base Lewis McChord. I got my flight physical down there. I took my flight aptitude test and all those kind of things. But it still took, all said and done, about 2 years. And then I got picked up and got back from my second tour in Okinawa. The Marines put me on the street at 6.5 years. The Army recruiter picked me up, and 24 hours later, I was in the Army and down at Fort Rucker, Alabama.
Get out.
To start warrant officer flight training. So,
dang, like Mustang. Yeah.
A total Mustang. Yeah.
There you are.
But it was super cool, and I ended up getting transitioned into Black Hawks. I went to the 101st as a medevac pilot, a medical evacuation pilot. What I didn't understand is, I was I was on the E6 list in the Marine Corps when I transferred over.
Which is incredible.
Yeah, I mean, better to be lucky than good, I guess. But I didn't understand the difference between a warrant officer and a commissioned officer, right?
Really?
I knew that, I knew some differences, but the warrant officers are critical, but they're very technically focused, right? Mm-hmm. They don't, you're likely never going to command as a warrant officer.
Oh, okay.
You're never going to, in the Army as a pilot, warrant officer pilot, you'll spend almost your entire career in the cockpit, which is what some people want.
Yeah.
But as a commissioned officer, you have different things you have to do to get promoted and all of that. So I had been a warrant for 2 years, and I was bumping up against the 10-year mark. I was getting close to the 10-year mark of my service then. and you had to be commissioned by the beginning of your 10th year of service. So you could have 10 years of commission service by the 20-year mark. That was the thing, to be able to retire as a commission. So I applied to Officer Candidate School. I think I hold the record of anyone I know have had my head shaved more times, because you get a shaved Marines, warrant officer, and then again.
You had to go to the whole training again.
So I went to Fort Benning, and I did 14 weeks.
Wait, how old were you?
Oh, when so 87. So I was 27 years old.
Okay, so and most of them in that time in the school, they're a lot younger, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah.
You're dealing with babies.
There was a few prior service in our class, 3 warrants.
Oh, okay.
And when I graduated, I was on my way to the 82nd Airborne Division as a pilot, and I had applied to the 160, the Special Ops world. And I called him on graduation. I did fairly well, high up in my class.
Not surprised.
And they said, hey, we'll give you a shot. You're probably not going to make it, but we'll give you a shot. And I made it. And then I really stayed in the Special Ops world. My first assignment out of Special Ops was as a battalion commander, as a lieutenant colonel. So I didn't just stay in the 160th. I flew with the Air Force Special Ops as an exchange pilot. I did a classified assignment.
Wow.
And then, but then I did my battalion command tour, got picked up for 2nd Battalion, went right back to SOF, and pretty much stayed there for the rest of my time.
What drew you to it? What was it?
Well, I mean, I'm sure the mystique was part of it, and I wanted to serve with the best. Yeah. I didn't think I would actually, I wasn't sure I would make it, frankly. But I wanted the opportunity to try. And, what I have seen in most special ops organization is, they're operating even at the staff level, they're operating at a very high level. And you come in here and you either go up to their level or you don't make it. And I was fortunate enough to go up to their level. And, I ended up in the 160th for years, and then ended up commanding 1st Battalion 160th. And then back to back, I went right up and took over the 160th Special Ops Aviation Regiment, which was something I never thought would happen. My goal was to retire as a major not a major general, but a major.
Get out.
Yeah. The selection rate was only 60%. So I thought, yeah, I could probably make that. So
made it and then some.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
Miles beyond.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to go a little bit fast forward there. So you have a long history with Gary.
I do.
Okay.
So I first met Gary at Skyball in Dallas.
Yeah. Oh, Skyball.
So it was 2008. I had one of my, and I know you know this gentleman very well, one of my pilots had crashed in Baghdad and broke his back. Gary Linfoot, Gary and Mary Linfoot. And they're running a nonprofit helping people to this day. And I knew about the iBot and that mobility device that really increases the quality of life.
That video of him when he's first standing.
Yeah, because I didn't realize this, but one of the things with people in wheelchairs that I think is uncomfortable, and it makes sense once you think about it, is they're always looking up at people.
Yeah.
Right? If somebody walks up to you and talks to you and they're standing above you, your natural reaction is to stand up. Right? You
That's
feel
so
intimidated. True. And this device, the iBot, allows you to do that. And so, anyway, I heard about the iBot. I didn't know, frankly, it was associated with Gary. And I reached out to a gentleman from American Airlines. And, they were very interested in supporting Gary Linfoot. And, they wanted to make sure he was qualified. And he ultimately was. And he got the device, and then they asked me to come to Dallas to speak at Skyball and just thank everyone, which I was happy to do, of course. And that's where I met Gary. And then, I went out and saw him when he was filming CSI New York.
How cool.
Yeah, our kids were swimming in his pool, and,
You got the behind the scenes
experience.
Oh,
totally, yeah. And, we're on the set, and there was a murder scene where there was some guy laying dead. My kids were eyes were hard-boiled eggs. They're like, I said, he's not really dead. He's fine.
It's fake, I promise.
Yeah, and the guy's talking to my kids while he's got like
Bloodied
blood everywhere. And then one of the guys said, hey, throw all this money around the bed, because this guy had money or whatever. So my kids are like freaking out because they think it's real money, Anyway, so we got to know each other, and, our friendship, just grew and grew and grew.
Mm-hmm.
And a defining moment, I think, where I really, truly appreciated Gary's character.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we talked about it before we started, but, what you see with Gary and on TV and in interviews is exactly who he is. I mean, there is no, A and B. It's, he is the same person, selfless and dedicated. But I was a commander of the 160th Regiment, Special Ops Aviation Regiment, and we had a particularly bad weekend. It was in October of 2009. And on a Friday night, I lost an aircraft off the coast of Virginia. They were doing fast rope training with SEALs, and the aircraft descended into the rigging of the ship. They were under night vision goggles. The aircraft crashed on the ship, injured several of the crew members and several of the SEALs severely, and killed one of the crew members, J.R. Strite, who he was in a different battalion then, but I had served with him in Iraq in 1st Battalion, and I knew him very well. That was Friday night. Saturday night, we had a spouse going through some severe marital issues with her husband, in same battalion now, same battalion. And she went into another room and took her own life. That was Saturday night. Sunday night, that same battalion was with a forward element deployed in western Afghanistan in an area near Herat, objective Lexington. We had an aircraft crash, killed 5 160th, 2 Special Forces, and 3 DEA agents. They were on the exfiltration. They'd already completed the mission. It was a drug-related, narco-related target. And, so there it is. Friday, lost J.R. Strite. Saturday, we lost a spouse. And Sunday, we lost an aircraft killed 5 of the gentlemen from my organization, as well as those DEA agents and the Special Forces. So, it was like the worst ever. And Tuesday night, right after that, Gary calls me out of the blue.
Of course.
And he heard. And he said, hey, I want to do something for those families. And, we're right in the middle of this war, right? We're in Afghanistan, we're in Iraq. I mean, we're losing people, not like at this level, but we're losing people fairly routinely. All the military units are. So I said, hey, God bless you. Thanks for doing that. But the fact is that the 101st has lost people. 5th Special Forces Group has lost people. And I don't feel right you honoring just our fallen, but, all of them. And, of course, he's like, absolutely. And he had just finished that movie with Jonathan Flora, Lieutenant Damban, for the Common Good.
Yep.
And so they offered to do they couldn't get the band together to do a concert that quick, so he said, we'll do a pre-screening of this movie for the Gold Star families. And I remember he was at Brooks Army Medical Center that afternoon visiting wounded, and he flew up because I remember my wife, Amy, was like, he's probably hungry, what does he eat? So I called the office, said, hey, what does he eat? And he it was turkey or sandwich or something. So Amy made him a turkey sandwich. So I'm carrying this turkey sandwich. Anyway, he walks out on the stage with Jonathan Flora and after the movie, and he spent, talked to the audience, and then he met with every Gold Star family, and it must have been 2-3 hours he was in line there. Never rushed anyone. I mean, he's just the same way he is today. And I was like, wow,
Nothing's changed.
That guy is really, he doesn't only talk the talk, he walks the walk.
Oh, yeah.
And from there, I was in Korea, and I sent him a note, and I was like, hey, I'm over here for a year, would be great for morale. And he said, let me see if the USO will help fund it. I think they were at their limit for that year. And I was like, that's okay. Don't worry about it. He's like, we'll fund it.
Yeah, he'll find a way.
And then he shows up over there. It was just awesome. I mean, he's just such a great human. That's our history.
I love it. When I started, that was one of the first videos that I saw. And it meant so much to me, just me coming out of my own service in the military. And I had been to Korea, and it was just so amazing to see. And he's just that way.
He really is.
Yeah.
We brought up a bunch of Korean children that were orphans from a local orphanage up on the stage at Camp Humphreys. He had done one at Casey, which is north, up near the DMZ, and then second concert at Camp Humphreys. And seeing those kids up there and seeing what, I mean, he's in his element when that's happening. It was just really super cool.
I love that. I love that.
Very touching and really just, I tell people there's two people that I know. One is Gary. The other one is this guy, Devin Capps, who's adopted multiple special needs kids from China. Whenever I want to be reminded about how marginal I truly am, I hang out with those two. So
that's perfectly said.
Yes.
Yeah. No, if there's one person that I've learned, I mean, he lives by his quote that, you know, he will always do a little more.
Yes.
And it's there are no cameras, there are no, you know, people to even see it. He is just consistently reaching out and pinging and just like, hey, do you need
where can he help?
Yep,
After the hurricanes in MacDill, you guys came, you know, he reached out to me and they came down and had, you know, I think with Robert Irvine and the folks, and did a meal for all the troops down there. I mean, he's always there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Okay, so looking back on your 40 years of service, I know this is a big question. So is there a moment that stands out as the most defining or impactful?
For me personally?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's probably not what you would think. Because I wasn't there, but I was flying with Air Force Special Ops Command down in Florida in October of '93. I had just returned from going through a Marine Corps course, WTI, Weapons and Tactics Instructor course at Yuma. I got pulled back early because we thought we were going into Haiti. This was, there was a coup issue with Aristide being overthrown, potential. And I also knew that my alma mater, the 160th, was in Mogadishu at this time, you know. And I got up I'd flown in Saturday night. I got up Sunday, and it was all over the news that we had lost a bunch of helicopters in Mogadishu. And it was, first report. So it was very vague. We ended up losing 18 people. And, one of my best friends that was in my wedding, I was in his wedding, was Mike Durant. And his wife called me and said he's missing. Everybody else in his crash that he was flying Super 6-4 was killed. All the bodies were gone, but everyone else, they had drugged the bodies away. And his wife called me. And she was obviously distraught. And I was a captain in 2003, and I said, I'm on a plane. I called my squadron commander, asked to be put on leave, and flew up at my own expense because I wanted to be there for the family. Right. I didn't know I knew the regiment would take good care of him. They do, but just to comfort her, and I didn't know he was alive. And when I got up there to Nashville, serendipity, here we are, and I saw a news show playing on some television or somewhere in the airport, interviewing him. If you remember, he's braced up against the wall. He's in bad shape. His back's broken. His leg's broken. His eye socket's broken, cracked or fractured. And that's the first time I knew he was alive. Man. So to me, of all that, and I've been in combat multiple times, I guess I always say I was fortunate that my timing was awesome to get to go to, be in all these operations. But I was never prouder of the 160th than I was that day. We lived up to our motto, Night Stalkers Don't Quit. We never left the ground force. We lost a bunch of aircraft that day. We lost a bunch of people that day. Cliff Walcott was killed in Super 6-1. My middle son is Mitchell Walcott Hutmacher. He's named after him. And I've always kept in touch with his widow, Chris, and his son, Robert. I just felt like I was part of something greater than myself, right? And that, and it really just focused me on service. And so I changed as an officer that day.
I was going to ask.
Not because I was in valor in combat that day, but because I saw it up close, and then I was involved in sort of the aftermath and understood what, sort of the price you pay for that commitment to those special operators on the ground.
Yeah, very deeply affected.
Oh, yeah, it changed my life. I mean, and Mike Durant's on the board of the Special Ops Warrior Foundation now. He's very happy. I mean, we harass each other all the time and lampoon each other all the time, but he is really one of the greatest humans I know.
Just as you should. Just
Absolutely.
Keep that friendship.
Oh, yeah, keep it real.
Yeah, keep it down to earth a little bit. No, I
100%.
love that. Oh, I love that. So, speaking of special operators, and you just explained it so beautifully, but they operate in some of the most high-stakes environments. And so what unique challenges did you face as a leader in that community? Of course, only what you can tell us.
Yeah. Well, so, when I first got there, I graduated Officer Candidate School in October of 87. I had to go through some, the officer basic course and a few things. But I ended up, airborne school and a few, things. And I ended up in the unit in April of 88.
Okay.
And we were involved in an operation then called Operation Prime Chance, where President Reagan had reflagged Kuwaiti tankers to U.S. The Iranians were laying mines to sink these tankers. And, Reagan wanted it to be U.S. flag because that ups the ante. Now you're attacking a sovereign U.S. vessel. I mean, that was the logic behind it. And so we were deployed along with, other members of all the services, I believe, on these barges. And we were, flying at night looking for the Iranian mine layer. I flew at 60, flying behind little birds. So I did that. And that was a hard mission. And we did it because no one else could do it. No one else could fly that low over the water with night vision goggles. I mean, it's a different story today. I mean, our capabilities are much more. But keep in mind, this is 88. Dang. It started in 87. No one else could do that.
You guys are the tip of the cusp there.
And then, from there, we went into Operation Just Cause in Panama, going after Noriega and all of his henchmen. And we did, I think, I could be wrong on the exact number here, but I think we hit 27 targets at each hour simultaneously.
Holy smokes.
Going after those key leaders to capture them. And then I remember at the last minute, there was some indications or intelligence that we may have been compromised, so they wanted to move up the hit on the Modella prison where we were going after. We had an American held hostage there, Kurt Muse. And, we were able to do that. And, I mean, no other unit in the world could have been able, or no other service. And this isn't braggadocious here. I'm just saying we had 27 targets in the middle of the night under night vision goggles, precision, with that surgical precision that, to going after those targets and minimizing any collateral damage or casualties. And then we go to Desert Storm, and I was flying there. We're going after the Scuds being shot into Israel by Iraq at the time. That was what we were doing. There were other special ops units inserting special forces behind enemy lines. So if you look at our history, and it continues through war criminals in Bosnia, which I was involved in that, and then after 9/11, Afghanistan, and then Iraq. I mean, we were going after the hard targets. As we should. General Schoonmaker said, to whom much is given, much is expected. And so we were resourced very well at the expense of the services in many cases and our general purpose force counterparts. We are expected to take those hard targets. And I think we just got better and better and better. And I think we're unmatched. Anywhere on this planet, not just aviation, but our ground force folks that we support.
Oh, yeah.
And being in support of them and being part of that team. I mean, I used to tell guys, I'd walk the line before a significant mission and say, hey, we'll never leave you, ever. If we put you in, we will always, always come get you. I don't care what it takes. We're going to come get you. Oh. And to me, Night Stalkers don't quit. It's a simple motto, but it really does define who we are.
Well, you rose to the ranks of Major General, not just Major, your goal, but Major General. And that's so impressive, and it really is a testament to how much your contributions to the military. And But it also, as you're explaining, like it changes your day to day, your day to day. And so this is kind of an odd question, but did you ever miss being in the fight, so to speak? Or did you ever like wish, that you could be in the thick of it, I guess you could say, versus as you grew in leadership, being in the more strategic portion of it?
I think if you stay focused on serving the greater good and having the most significant impact you can for where you're serving and at what rank, that keeps you, I think, grounded and focused. Would I have rather been, wiggling the sticks? And I flew an armed Black Hawk and a Little Bird guns. I mean, admittedly, I was more proficient in the armed Black Hawk, but I remember launching when I was 1st Battalion Commander. I was downrange in Iraq, and I went out on a combat mission with Little Birds, and it was like relaxing.
Oh.
Like I'm taking off, and I was like, man, I'm not worried about who's trying to steal my money from my budget and blah, 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 and all this bureaucry. All I got to do is worry about the enemy.
Yep, that's just the enemy.
Yeah, and I'm not surrounded, which is where you normally are, in the bureaucratic sense. So, yeah, I missed it, but I'm also well aware that it's a young man's game, a young woman's game. And we have unbelievable women aviators in the 160 that are just exceptional. And so, there's a time and a place for it. I was fortunate to spend more than almost any other commissioned officer in those, flying those missions, flying with the Air Force. I was an instructor pilot down in Hurlburt. It was great. But you continue to serve, and if you're self-aware, you realize that you're at a different place, and you need to continue to serve with that same commitment, even if it may not be exactly what you prefer to be doing.
Right. There's always growth.
100%, and it's inevitable, right? You're going to change. Life's going to change for you, and
just got to go with it, I guess.
100%.
So how did your military experience shape your leadership philosophy?
So one, I start with the premise that leadership is, in my opinion, I know there's some that would disagree, but I'm pretty firm, resolute in this belief. Leadership is a learned skill, right? I mean, you don't come out of the womb as a dynamic leader, right? I don't think. And I think it's shaped by your experiences, and it changes. Yeah. So, my first leadership, I guess, was an NCO in the Marine Corps. And I remember, and it was started as a corporal. I got pinned on as a corporal, and I was a squad leader. And I just, the day before, I was obviously a lance corporal.
Right.
And I was in the rank and file, and now I had to make that transition.
Quick, too.
100%.
Yeah.
And you have to establish yourself. You have to, make difficult calls. Granted, corporal didn't make a lot of huge difficult calls, but
comparatively speaking.
Yeah, and but you're really what I would call practicing direct leadership at that point, because you can reach out and touch everyone that you're in charge of. And then, as you get more senior, you go to more indirect leadership, and the skill sets change. So, you have to continue to evolve. And I had a warrant officer, he passed away last year, that I went through Green Platoon with when I first went into the 160th, Carl Meyer. And he said, hey, you should, when I was a regimental commander, and we were very close, and he said, you should walk the line. And so I block out 2 hours every week as a regimental commander, and I just walk around. I never told anybody where I was going. I never chewed anybody out, right? I didn't want to change the dynamic. This wasn't an inspection. It wasn't me. It was me sort of understanding what the issues were where the rubber meets the road. Yeah. And not just for pilots and crew chiefs, who I'd see those, but also like the admin, the administrative people, the logisticians, what we call the back shops, aviation maintenance people. And I'd look for what I call low-hanging fruit, things that I could fix at my level, and I wanted them to know that, what they said mattered. And I'll give you a quick example. So I was in an engine back shop where we were barely holding on with aircraft. We had a lot of combat damage, and you have mandatory maintenance. We call it scheduled maintenance. Every certain number of hours, few hundred hours, you have to bring an aircraft in for overhaul, and a big part of that is overhauling the engines and bore scoping them and making sure that they're performing
Everything.
at max efficiency. And I was walking around this engine shop, and there was all these young kids in there, and I called them all together and said, hey, talk to them about my leadership philosophy, and I asked them, hey, how could I make your world better? What is irritating you? What's pissing you off, kind of thing. And one kid said, hey, sir, I max my Army physical fitness test every day, every time, but I have to do organized runs with the lowest common denominator, and and it wasn't unheard of. We call it an incentive PT program. And he said, why don't we have an incentive PT program? If you score above whatever number, that you can PT on your own, that's more challenging for you on an individual level. So I walked out of that shop. I walked up to my office. I talked to my sergeant major. I said, do we have one? He said, no. He said, do you think we should? He goes, I don't see why not. I reached out to the first sergeants. This is all in the span of an hour or two. And said, do you have one at the company level? Am I missing it? Should we have one? And everyone but one said yes. One guy said, no, they'll be laying in bed, while we're out doing run-ins. And I'm like, well, if they're maxing their physical fitness test, I don't really care how they do it.
Then if they're laying in bed and that's the way they do
Right.
it.
If that's if eating Twinkies, laying in bed works for them, then let's keep doing it. So I put together a policy letter. And ran it by the sergeant major. He blessed it, and I walked right back down to that kid that same day and said, hey, you asked about an incentive PT program. Here's the policy letter. It's effective immediately.
Oh, man.
And look, that's not cosmic or anything. And some people say, oh, great, Commander, you established an incentive PT program. It's more than that. It's saying, it's sending a message that I'm listening and what they say matters. And frankly, it wasn't just that young specialist that I was talking to. It's everybody that was in, because that went through the unit like wildfire. 6 months later, I was hopping on a C-17 going to Iraq, and I rolled out my thermarest and I had my sleeping bag, and I was getting ready to, crawl underneath a helicopter and sleep on the floor of this C-17. And the sergeant came up to me and goes, hey, sir, I don't know if you remember me. I was in the engine shop when, you changed the battalion policy on incentive PT. He said, that kid still crows that he changed battalion policy. I said, he's right. And that's one example. But, I think you look for opportunities like that. And, that I got more out of those walking the line. People say, well, I took time doing other stuff. 100%. But even in the rearview mirror, I would say that was the most productive time I spent in command, other than being deployed forward, because I did the same thing when I was in Iraq. I go walk into the crew chiefs after they'd launched the night aircraft or whatever. I'd sit down and they're watching videos or doing whatever they're doing, and just, hey, how's it going? What are you doing? Like, are you going to school? Are you pursuing off-duty education? Are you bettering yourself? And spending time with people. To me, I think, it helped us maintain focus and effectiveness and trust in the leadership.
Absolutely. You were a real person.
Yeah, I'm not, listen, I was a private. My first official duty was scrubbing toilets, so, and, I understand that. And I wouldn't say that I would make any decisions different if I were. I don't think I would have if I was a straight commissioned, an ROTC or a service academy graduate. And I think, our best officers come out of our, collectively our service academies, frankly. Absolutely. They get, very focused instruction on leadership there. But it did change the way I message change, right? I understood that what makes sense at the head shed or at my level may not make sense down at the lower level. And the fact is, their opinion, their buy-in matters. And so I went out of my way to communicate changes in policies and why I was making the decisions I made, even if we disagreed. As a one-star, I integrated. I was given the responsibility of integrating female aviators at the aircrew member level. Wow. the conventional Army and the other services had always had it.
Mm-hmm.
Not always, but for years. But we didn't. And as you would imagine, I mean, that's moving people's cheese right there. That's a significant change. I'm comfortable, like, debating the merits of it. One, I personally supported it. And two, I'm okay in that. I don't, people don't need to kiss the ring with me, right? Mm-hmm. So, I'm happy to, talk them through it, my logic. And in the end, I'm sure we agreed to disagree with many of those folks, but at least they were heard.
Yes, exactly.
And one of the best leaders I ever worked for, Mike Zonfrelli, used to tell me, most people just want to be heard.
Yeah. So, but now, how do you apply your philosophy to the work you do today, which is very different?
Very different, but it's still service, right?
Exactly.
So, it's funny. I said, I think I told you, I mentioned earlier that leadership is a learned skill.
Exactly.
It's also more of a journey than with no destination, right? You're going to continue to improve or evolve as a leader.
Perfectly said.
And I was taken over from the very capable vice at the Special Ops Warrior Foundation. I had been selected to be the next president CEO. I wasn't even out of the military yet. We were still transitioning in 2018. And I remember coming to his office, now my office, and I didn't even know how many people were in there and,
really?
Worked there. I didn't know anything about it. I mean, I knew what they did, so I don't want to say I didn't know anything about it, but I didn't know anything about structure and who did what and what the personalities were. But I remember asking him, I said, well, how many people work in the foundation? He said, 16. And in my head, I remember thinking, 16?
That's
How hard could that be?
Famous last words.
100% famous last words. That is, I mean, in the special ops world, our hiring process is very invasive. I mean, when I went through, you served in the 160th and then in a classified organization. I had no secrets. I mean, they talked to my peers, they talked to my subordinates, they talked to my superiors, they looked at all my evaluations. I mean, you don't have that insights out here.
No. It's the wild, wild
west. You'd be stuck in the court, forever for invasion of privacy, rightfully so. So it was, and it's people are motivated by different things. In the special ops world, the worst thing that could happen to you is being asked to leave.
Right.
There's different motivators out here. And so I continued to evolve as a leader. And it wasn't without failures on my part, and continuing to learn. But, that being said, people respond pretty consistently to positive leadership, right?
Definitely.
Like our kids, our college kids, if they get a 3.5 or above on any semester in college, I handwrite them a personal note, encouraging them and telling them, hey, we're super proud of you. And it isn't about, Major General Hutmacher right now, but it's just sending a message, hey, we care enough that and I wrote like probably 45 of those. I write them 45 of those notes every semester.
Wow.
And, to me, it's all about encouraging but it's different. I'm also, I don't deal with the students on a regular basis, but I do see them at events and I do these letters but to me, I had to adjust my leadership tactics. I can't walk in there and say, okay, everybody stand to, we're checking haircuts, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You can't do that stuff.
No.
So you just evolve as a leader. And I'm continuing to do that. And just when I think I got it all figured out, I get thrown another curveball and I get little air let out of my balloon and I'm like, okay, still
Hold
learning.
on a second.
That's right. You're not as cool as you think you are.
Little reality check.
That's right. That's right.
So what inspired you to take on the mission at Special Operations Warrior Foundation?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that question. When I was the 1st Battalion Commander and the Regimental Commander in the 160th, at that time, we had lost more people than any other like-size organization, not only in Special Ops, but I'll make the leap there of any conventional brigade.
Oh, man.
And it was just the nature of the targets we were going on. I don't think that's true today. I'm pretty sure it's not, but then it was. And the military in general and Special Ops especially does a wonderful job of taking care of those families in the immediate aftermath of that death, right? Honoring the service and sacrifice of those we've lost, but also being there for the families, whether it's Meals on Wheels. My wife was part of that. I lost an airplane January 30th of 2003, DAP-185, crashed outside of Bagram. We lost 4. And as soon as the notification team leaves, there's family members there with like tough boxes full of supplies, and they camp out there with the families and take care of them during that initial shock of the loss. But eventually we have to get back to work, right? Mm-hmm. We have an obligation to the country. We have a mission. And we can't stay in mourning. We just can't. The nation doesn't pay us to do that. The nation doesn't expect that of us. What I learned early on was that one of the organizations that's there long after that bright spotlight is off those families is a Special Ops Warrior family. When you described it, you got it exactly right. Depending on the age of that child, and our youngest child is in our program right now, is not even born yet.
I love that.
He's a young man. His dad was a Special Forces Green Beret who was killed in December of last year in an accident in Eglin Air Force Base. I talked to his father and his fiancée who's pregnant about a week ago, and she's pregnant with a young son. So, we're going to be there through preschool, unlimited tutoring, all of those things, private school tuition assistance, prepping them for college or whatever they do after high school. They could go to a technical school, which we're 100% supportive of that. It's their decision. And with them for the rest of their life. But, I saw that. I saw that, that enduring commitment was, and some other organizations as well, but the Special Ops Warrior Foundation was there day in and day out, long after people have moved on. And the units, even over time with turnover, right, that relationship changes, it evolves. But we are with them every step of the way. That young man that is not yet to be born, just to give you an idea, we will fund his education through 2047.
Holy
So that really gives you an idea of that enduring commitment. And, one of my mentors, General Doug Brown, had asked me, I was getting ready to get out, retire, and he said, do you have any interest in, he didn't even say it was a Special Ops Warrior Foundation. He said, do you have any interest in running a nonprofit? And I didn't know who it was. I'd already signed up to be an ambassador for Gary. I'd already talked to Gary on the phone and said, hey, I'll do whatever you need me to do. I'll clean toilets, good at that, done it before.
What are we talking about? Yeah.
And then I almost said no to General Brown, but then I thought about it and I said, I should learn more. And when I found out that it was a Special Ops Warrior Foundation, I took it.
Well, for me personally, serving alongside Gary, I feel like I've got so many stories of our heroes that just deeply inspire me that I carry. I just carry with me each and every day, and it is kind of the driving force that just keeps me going and so proud of this mission. And so I was wondering if you can share one or any particular story of a family or a recipient of your programs that just kind of sits with you.
Yeah, there's one. In fact, her husband now, Jim Ravella, is a member of the foundation.
I love it.
So Ginger Ravella, previously Ginger Gilbert, her husband Troy Gilbert was flying an F-16 over Iraq on what we call a CAS line, a close air support line. So they're out there flying around, and they're there whoever needs help or whoever requests close air support. And that day, my organization was on a daylight mission to get a high-value target, and things went south for us. We lost one of my Little Bird gun aircraft, an AH-6, was hit in the tail with an RPG, crashed. The crew members were injured, but not seriously. They dropped the ground force off on the ground in the 60s, and the 60s departed with the injured to fly back to Balad Air Base. And we were outgunned. We had a highly trained elite special ops unit on the ground, and they were attacking. A flight of F-16s came in, and Troy Gilbert was the section lead. And, I mean, he turned the tide that day. He came in and provided close air support and really blunted that counterattack by the enemy. And as a result of one of his gun runs, he crashed. And he got I don't know for sure, but he was diving on a target. We call it target fixation. You don't want to pull off. You got rounds on, so you keep pushing.
Yeah.
And he ended up crashing in the desert. And, it wasn't until years later where we finally fully recovered his remains. And my unit went in with the SEALs and pulled out his remains. And I was at his internment in Arlington many years later. I was still active duty at the time. But when I took over the foundation, Troy's name came across. The policies at the time, it's changed since, but he was an exception to policy because he wasn't a special ops guy. He was an F-16 guy. But I was familiar with the mission. I knew what he did. I knew the impact he had on the mission, and the board agreed. And now we're educating all of their kids. Their youngest two, the two left in school, are twin girls that are at Auburn. I was hoping they might have picked Clemson, just saying. My wife and my youngest son went there, but they didn't. Troy's leadership was inspiring. Ginger is an inspiring leader, speaks on resilience.
We had her on the podcast, and she shared the story.
And
That's
she's
so
speaking
amazing.
for our foundation in Dallas in
love
October. And, I follow them very closely. And so if there's one, that's a perfect example. The other one I'll share is real quickly is Adam Brown was in SEAL Team 6. He was killed in Afghanistan. His daughter, Savannah Brown, graduated University of Arkansas with a 4.0, and now she's in law school at SMU. To see the Ravella and Gilbert kids and then Savannah Brown reach what I think their full potential, to be a small part of that, to relieve them of that financial burden, to help with the mentorship and the guidance as they navigate all of those different legs of the journey of education, that's super satisfying.
Yeah. There's nothing quite like it.
For sure.
It's beautiful. Okay, so we've talked about the impact that these families have had on you, and I too share many of those stories that just resonate so deeply with me. And so, how can you not be inspired by it all?
100%.
And so the mission is it's just about the mission.
It is. No balance in your bank account. And I'm not saying you shouldn't take care of your families, and you have to be cognizant of that. But ultimately, that's not going to give you satisfaction in your life and fulfillment for sure.
One of the things that always stand out to me too, part of our mission is the Soaring Valor program.
Love it.
Where
Spoke at it.
Oh my goodness!
I'm speaking at it again this fall.
I was gonna say, I was like, you've attended that, and
Gary always makes me wear my uniform. That's the only thing I don't like. I haven't
he
worn it.
likes to pull out the big guns.
I know. I wore it one time since I retired. It was at Soaring Valor. Now I got to wear it again. So.
But they love. Oh my goodness!
Those
World War II
veterans. I support it.
When they see the general walking in,
I know.
You and Mary Eisenhower, like. The two of you, it is just this moment of you can just see them get so giddy and excited and loving to call you General and just
and it's not about Clay Hutmacher. It is, I get it. It's about the the fact that you got a general there. So I reluctantly but obediently put on my uniform for Gary. So yes.
He's pretty good at convincing people.
Yeah, he pretty much gave me no option. Lieutenant Dan ordered General Hutmacher to wear his uniform, and he's going to do it. So.
Sir. I'll be out there.
Exactly.
So what advice would you give to someone looking to start their career in the military?
I think understand that there's going to be sacrifice and that you're going to be wet and miserable and cold, and you're going to be, at times you're going to have imperfect leaders. But when you look back on it, after you're out, after you take off the uniform, by far this is going to be the most defining experience you have in your life. And it's going to shape you and change you in ways that are the most important. It's going to build character. It's going to build a sense of commitment and service to a cause greater than self. You can't buy that. You're not going to get that working at IBM or Netflix or, Motorola or any. You get some of that in the nonprofit world for sure, but that service and sacrifice is just something you can't replicate anywhere else. So understand that you're going to have bumps in the road. Understand that you're going to have failures and setbacks. That's part of life. That's part of growing. But from each of those, it's how you respond to those. Mm-hmm. Do you take that as constructive and how you can be better going forward? And keep your eye on the ball. Why you joined in the first place, right? You joined for some, for some reason, some idealism to be, to serve. That may change. And the reason we serve changes over time. I think at least it did for me. I knew that I had to get out of the gutter. And that's and the Marines were my way to at least my best option to do that, and they delivered, and the Army is following that. But just know that, play the long game, and think about what. And in the end, you tell me. I mean, are you happy for your service in the Marines? I mean, I wouldn't change anything. No. I mean, I am such a better person for serving others. I mean, I'm going through a ceremony where I'm an honoree here in a few months, and I've been thinking about what I'm going to say. And I'm going to say is, hey, I got more out of this than the military ever got out of me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it doesn't just affect them, too. It affects their family.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, your family.
So that's what I tell them. You're embarking on a great adventure. It's not going to be easy. Mm-hmm. Nothing worthwhile ever is.
Yeah.
But in the rearview mirror, you're going to be really happy you did it.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautifully said. So, as you know, this podcast is in honor of Mac, Gary's son, who we lost in January of 2024.
I remember your call to me.
Yeah, that was a
tough one.
Yeah, that's been rough. It was hard time. And near the end of Mac's life, he really focused on his legacy, what kind of imprint he would leave on the world. And it was beautiful what he did. So as you reflect on your career and your current work, what legacy do you hope to leave?
Well, one, as an aside, I met Mac the first time when I was at dinner at Gary's house in California.
Oh my gosh, I love stories of him. Okay, I'm ready.
And Mac was in high school.
Yeah.
And I remember and I was so impressed with him, his maturity. Yeah. He was courteous and professional, and just very personable. Then I met him in Vegas. We were playing. I forget the name of that alley. We were playing on some
Salute to the Troops.
Yeah, we were doing a salute to the troops. There's some they got zip lines going.
Oh yeah, it was Fremont Street.
Yeah, Fremont. That was it. Yeah, so I was speaking at that.
Yeah.
And Mac was there, and he was healthy obviously then, and seeing him there. So I'm honored to have met him, and certainly I pray for Gary and his family every day. So my legacy. I want to be known, I guess, in first as a caring leader that was probably flawed but committed to being better every day. But the most important thing is, being a good husband and a father. And, my wife could probably fill up 3 or 4 podcasts with all of my shortcomings, and rightfully so. But, she sacrificed. She was in the Air Force. I met her when I was flying with the Air Force. She gave up a very promising career as an intelligence officer to raise our 3 sons, and they are all very successful. 2 on the market for anybody out there. Mentioned it earlier. They'll kill me if they hear this podcast, but no names, but text me. And they're successful kids, committed, honest, hardworking, and I was absent. I was absent, and I had no choice, because if I wouldn't have went, somebody else would have had to spend more time downrange than me. But I want to be known as a good father and a good husband. That's more important than being a good leader or a good soldier. And it is leadership, I guess, in a different regard.
It is.
But that's the legacy I want to leave.
Good kids.
Exactly. And my wife gets all the credit. Leaving the toilet seat up, not making her bed, totally me. Everything else is their mother.
One day, hoping she'll call you General.
Yeah, one day, yeah.
The jury's still out.
Yeah, I'm not, hope springs eternal, but I'm not optimistic.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. And just thanks for your mentoring and your scholarships to these incredibly the stories that you share, these kids are your kids.
They are.
They're your babies. And just the pride that exudes from you as you watch them as they're just growing, and it's beautiful.
It is. And I'm grateful, frankly. I mean, we got just under 1,200 kids now, from college seniors all the way to that young man who's that'll be born here in a few months. And to have that opportunity to continue to serve after just like you have with the Gary Sinise Foundation, that can serve after you take off the uniform, is I'm nothing but grateful.
You and your team, Special Operations Warrior Foundation,
and
you guys are doing
partners.
Beautiful
shoulder.
work.
In Afghanistan, we called it, when I was working with the Afghans, Shona Bashona, shoulder to shoulder, and that's why I feel about Gary and the foundation. They're always willing to step in and help these deserving families and many, many others. And I always appreciate it.
We're doing it together.
We are. 100%.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. And as we do with every podcast episode, Mac will close out the show.
You've been listening to GSF Podcast, the official podcast of the Gary Sinise Foundation. If you'd like to find out more about what the Gary Sinise Foundation is up to, or if you'd like to make a donation, please visit www.GarySiniseFoundation.org. Make sure to tune in next time for more interviews, and thanks for joining us.